Gino Palaso was arrested at the airport. Welcome to Reality News, where we uncover the real story behind reality TV. What you're about to hear isn't a recap, it's an investigation. We've spoken with insider sources, examined legal documents, and pieced together details the show left out. The divorce between Gino and Jasmine is more complicated than it looks. Beneath the surface, there's a web of legal issues, revenge, and financial risks that could destroy one of them. This is more than a breakup, it's a battle. At the center is a little-known Michigan law that turns the separation into a serious legal challenge. The official story starts simply. Gino, exhausted and bitter, finally decides to file for divorce. He had threatened this many times before, but now he acted. He returned to the lawyer who handled his first divorce over 10 years ago, seeking familiar ground before stepping into chaos. The lawyer immediately sensed this would not be a simple case. It would be a legal battle. Gino's first divorce, after 7 years, was amicable and straightforward. His second marriage to Jasmine, lasting 2 years but with only 10 months of living together, was extremely volatile. This was not a gradual breakup, it was explosive. Gino told his lawyer that Jasmine had cheated and that he felt used as a stepping stone for her to secure a green card. He wasn't just heartbroken, he felt deceived. Unlike his first divorce, he wasn't seeking resolution, he wanted revenge. Gino's emotional state led him into a dangerous legal situation. Instead of being strategic, he focused on punishing Jasmine. During his first meeting with the lawyer, he admitted to reporting her to immigration authorities twice, believing she had committed fraud. He treated the divorce papers as weapons, not tools to separate legally. This focus on punishment caused him to miss a major legal issue. The most critical problem was a Michigan law known as the presumption of paternity. Gino believed Jasmine's pregnancy with another man, Matt, would prove her cheating and give him an advantage. He thought he had a winning case. The reality was shocking. In Michigan, if a woman gives birth while married, her husband is legally assumed to be the father. The biological father's identity doesn't matter, nor does living in separate states. If Gino didn't act correctly, he could be financially responsible for the child. His lawyer explained that, as the presumed father, Gino could owe child support for years, covering medical insurance, tuition, and other costs. Over 20 years, this could reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. Gino realized his assets and savings could be used to support another man's child. Gino panicked. He had gone from feeling victimized to suddenly being legally responsible for a child he wasn't related to. The lawyer reassured him that this presumption wasn't final, but it was a legal hurdle that needed immediate action. To resolve the situation, Gino would need a DNA test to prove he wasn't the biological father. That alone wasn't enough. Matt, the biological father, would also need to sign a legal document acknowledging paternity and taking full financial responsibility for the child. This combined science and legal strategy was the way to remove Gino from the situation. The deadline was the most important piece of information the lawyer gave Gino. Contesting the presumption of paternity in Michigan isn't open-ended. You have 3 years from the child's birth to act. That may seem like plenty of time, but in the world of legal disputes, it passes quickly. The moment the baby was born, a countdown began for Gino. Every day he spent stewing over Jasmine's behavior brought him closer to being trapped. A reasonable person would act immediately, file for divorce, and challenge the paternity before the deadline and a potential 6-figure financial disaster. But Gino was not reasonable. His need for revenge made him make dangerous choices. Shockingly, he chose not to file for divorce yet. Even though his lawyer warned him about the paternity trap and the ticking clock, he stayed put. To outsiders, this seemed insane. Why risk his finances? The answer lies in his warped idea of leverage. Gino believed that Jasmine's immigration status gave him power. He was willing to risk everything to manipulate her green card process. Instead of using the divorce to protect himself, he treated it as a weapon in his personal struggle with her. His lawyer warned him that this was extremely risky, like playing with fire in a house full of dynamite. Gino gave 2 weak explanations for delaying the divorce. The first involved money. He said he would wait until the stock market fell, hoping that a market crash would lower Jasmine's settlement demand. It was a risky and short-sighted tactic. The second, and far more serious reason, was immigration control. Gino told his lawyer he believed that divorcing her now would let her move forward with her green card. He thought by staying married, he could block her and ruin her life in America. To understand this, you need to know about Jasmine's green card. She was in a 2-year conditional period. During this time, the couple had to jointly file an I-751 form to prove the marriage was real. This included showing joint bank accounts, photos, affidavits, and shared bills. Filing together is the normal way to remove conditions and get the permanent 10-year green card. If the couple divorces before filing, the process changes. Jasmine would have to request a waiver to file alone, showing the marriage was genuine or that she was a victim of abuse. This is possible, but much harder. Thousands succeed every year, but Gino saw it as a loophole to exploit, not a legitimate option. He believed staying married would stop her from filing and force her out of the country when her conditional green card expired. He thought he controlled her future, acting out of spite and revenge. The lawyer repeatedly warned him, but Gino was obsessed with controlling her immigration status. Meanwhile, the paternity clock was still ticking, threatening his financial security. He was risking everything for a pointless vendetta. The lawyer finally laid out the consequences. Delaying the divorce would increase legal bills. Each consultation and phone call added more costs, and Gino was essentially paying to stay in danger. There was also a bigger risk. The lawyer asked, what if Jasmine files first? Gino, blinded by ego, didn't consider this. In the legal system, the other party can act too. If Jasmine filed first, Gino would lose control and be in a weaker position. That's exactly what happened. While Gino remained in Michigan, clinging to his plan, Jasmine acted. She filed for divorce in Florida, where she lived. This move completely ruined Gino's revenge strategy. Filing in Florida not only bypassed his plan, but also sparked a dispute over which state's court had jurisdiction. This delay meant discussions over assets and paternity were put on hold. Gino now had to deal with attorneys in another state, attend court appearances, and fight a legal battle across state lines. His Michigan-based paternity claims might not even get proper attention. Even as his 3-year window to contest paternity was closing, Jasmine could proceed with the divorce, leaving him to deal with paternity on his own. His attempt to control her had failed, and now he faced a legal struggle on 2 fronts. To make matters worse, she used public notice by publishing the divorce papers in a local newspaper, adding another layer to the legal complexity. Gino was now trapped in a situation far more complicated than he could have imagined. His plan to control Jasmine's green card had completely backfired. By filing in Florida, she had forced the legal battle to move out of Michigan, undermining his attempts to exploit the paternity presumption. Gino's focus on revenge had blinded him to the possibility that she could act first. The jurisdiction fight alone became a huge headache. The Florida court had to decide whether it had authority over the divorce because Jasmine lived there. Until that question was answered, Gino couldn't even make arguments about property or child-related issues. Every day that passed meant more legal fees, more stress, and more lost control. The delay also brought him dangerously close to the 3-year deadline in Michigan for contesting paternity. Despite being warned repeatedly, he still hadn't filed there. Meanwhile, Gino's fixation on immigration sabotage continued to cloud his judgment. He believed that simply staying married would stop Jasmine from moving forward with her conditional green card. He had no understanding that the waiver process existed precisely to deal with situations like this. If she filed for a waiver, she could still prove her marriage was legitimate or claim abuse, and she could move forward independently. Gino was acting on the false idea that he could control the timing and outcome. But in reality, the law gave Jasmine options he couldn't block. His lawyer tried everything to get through to him. They repeatedly explained the financial and legal risks. They emphasized that delaying the divorce not only increased legal costs, but also exposed him to massive financial liability for the child under the Michigan paternity presumption. If he did nothing, he could be legally required to pay child support for years. Yet Gino refused to listen. His need for revenge and his obsession with power over Jasmine outweighed any sense of self-preservation. At this point, Gino's situation was spiraling out of control. He was facing multiple legal battles in 2 states. In Michigan, he risked being forced to support a child that wasn't his if he didn't act before the 3-year deadline. In Florida, Jasmine was actively filing for divorce and challenging his assumptions about the control he thought he had. The combination of jurisdiction disputes, paternity presumption, and immigration concerns created a complex web that Gino had to navigate. But he was still trapped in a cycle of revenge rather than strategy. The lawyer explained that time was the most critical factor. Every day that passed without a formal divorce filing in Michigan increased the risk of losing his ability to contest paternity. Simultaneously, every day that Gino focused on sabotaging Jasmine's green card was a day wasted in preparing a legal defense. The window to act legally was closing fast, and his obsession with revenge was a dangerous distraction. Gino's reasoning was deeply flawed. He believed that by staying married, he could delay Jasmine's immigration process and force her out of the country. He didn't consider that the U.S. government provides mechanisms for individuals in conditional marriages to protect their rights. Thousands of people successfully navigate waivers each year. But Gino was convinced he held the power of life and death over her status. This fantasy became the driving force behind his decisions, even as his financial and legal reality deteriorated. The lawyer had to intervene directly. They laid out a step-by-step plan to protect Gino from financial disaster. First, he had to challenge the Michigan paternity presumption immediately. This required filing legal motions and requesting a DNA test to prove he wasn't the biological father. Second, he had to secure documentation from Matt, the biological father, acknowledging legal and financial responsibility for the child. Third, he had to carefully coordinate any actions in Florida to avoid giving Jasmine an advantage while still protecting his rights in Michigan. For Gino, these instructions were difficult to follow because they required him to act rationally, calmly, and strategically, the exact opposite of the behavior fueled by revenge. Every time he imagined delaying the divorce to sabotage her green card, he ignored the immediate threat of financial liability. Every moment spent plotting control over Jasmine's life was a moment lost in securing his own legal protection. The psychological toll on Gino was enormous. He oscillated between panic, anger, and despair. His obsession with punishing Jasmine made him ignore the ticking clock, yet he was also terrified of the consequences of inaction. This created a loop where his desire for revenge directly worsened his own situation. It wasn't just a legal problem. It was a personal and emotional trap he had built for himself. Jasmine, meanwhile, acted decisively. By filing in Florida, she not only took control of the divorce, but also complicated Gino's legal strategy. Florida courts operate under different rules than Michigan courts. The Florida filing meant Gino now had to hire attorneys familiar with Florida law, attend hearings far from home, and navigate procedural differences that could delay his ability to contest paternity. The delay also threatened to undermine any leverage he thought he had over her immigration status. The paternity presumption in Michigan remained a looming threat. If Gino failed to file in time, he would automatically be considered the child's legal father, regardless of biological reality. This would force him to cover all financial responsibilities, including support, education, medical care, and other costs. Over the next 18 years, this could amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars. The irony was bitter. His obsession with punishing Jasmine could bankrupt him. The lawyer emphasized that Gino had to act quickly and prioritize the paternity issue over revenge. They warned him that any further delay would compound costs and legal exposure. Yet Gino's mind remained fixated on controlling Jasmine's green card. He believed that staying married allowed him to stand in her way, ignoring the reality that the legal system provided paths for her to continue independently. His fantasy of control blinded him to the real risks: financial ruin, legal complications across 2 states, and the loss of personal agency. The attorney also warned Gino about the danger of Jasmine filing first. Once she initiated proceedings, she would set the pace, and he would be forced to respond. His position would weaken, and he could lose the ability to shape the outcome. This wasn't hypothetical, it was inevitable. As Gino obsessed over revenge, Jasmine acted strategically. By the time he realized it, she had filed in Florida, effectively seizing control of the legal process. Public notice, as part of the Florida process, added another layer of complexity. Jasmine published the divorce papers in a local newspaper, meeting procedural requirements and alerting Gino officially. This meant he could no longer rely on surprise or delay tactics. The case was now fully in motion, and every day of inaction brought him closer to both legal and financial jeopardy. At this point, Gino faced a harsh reality. His obsession with revenge had not only failed, but also made his legal position weaker than if he had acted rationally from the beginning. He had wasted time, spent money unnecessarily, and allowed Jasmine to dictate the pace and location of the divorce. The Michigan paternity presumption still hung over him like a sword, and the 3-year deadline was closing rapidly. Gino's only hope was to follow his lawyer's instructions precisely. He had to act immediately to contest paternity in Michigan, coordinate carefully with Florida attorneys, and put aside his desire for revenge. Any further delay could have catastrophic consequences. The very legal and financial trap he had ignored now threatened to destroy him, and the only way out required abandoning the fantasy of control he had clung to for so long. Ultimately, the situation highlighted how Gino's personal vendetta had collided with the law. His belief that he could manipulate both Jasmine's life and the legal system was a dangerous illusion. In reality, the law operates on timelines, deadlines, and procedural rules, not personal grudges. Gino's story became a cautionary tale of how obsession, revenge, and misunderstanding the law can combine to create a nearly unmanageable crisis. The final lesson was clear. The law prioritizes objective rules, deadlines, and protection for children above personal disputes. Gino's failure to understand the Michigan paternity presumption, the immigration waiver process, and the jurisdictional implications of Jasmine's Florida filing nearly cost him everything. The legal system didn't care about his personal anger or sense of betrayal. It enforced rules that had real consequences, and Gino learned that the hard way. Gino's situation continued to spiral. His obsession with revenge over Jasmine's green card had cost him precious time, and now the reality of the law was catching up with him. While he remained focused on controlling her, he had ignored the key legal steps necessary to protect himself. Every day he delayed, the Michigan paternity clock ticked closer to the 3-year limit, and the Florida case continued to advance. By the time Gino realized the severity of his situation, he was already behind. Jasmine's filing in Florida meant she had set the pace, and he could no longer dictate the terms. He now had to react instead of act, responding to her legal moves instead of initiating his own. This shift put him on the defensive, weakening his leverage over both the divorce and the child support issue. In Michigan, the presumption of paternity remained a serious threat. If Gino failed to file a challenge in time, the court would automatically consider him the legal father of Jasmine's child, regardless of biological truth. This would make him financially responsible for the child, including education, medical care, insurance, and living expenses, possibly for the next 18 years or more. The financial impact alone could drain his savings and jeopardize his assets. His lawyer emphasized that Gino's only chance to prevent disaster was to file a paternity challenge immediately. This required a DNA test to scientifically prove he was not the father. Even with the test, he would also need Matt, the biological father, to formally acknowledge paternity and assume financial responsibility for the child. Until that happened, the legal presumption still applied, and Gino's liability could continue to accumulate. Despite this, Gino's focus remained divided. He continued to obsess over Jasmine's immigration status, convinced he could delay or sabotage her green card. He believed staying married would block her from filing the waivers she would need if they divorced, forcing her to leave the country once her conditional green card expired. In his mind, he held the power to determine her future in the United States. In reality, he had no such control. The U.S. immigration system provides paths for conditional green card holders to proceed independently, and Jasmine could apply for a waiver to remove the conditional status if necessary. Gino's obsession blinded him to the risk of time running out. The more he focused on revenge, the more the legal deadlines approached, threatening his financial stability. His lawyer warned that every delay increased costs and reduced options. Ignoring this advice, Gino continued to prioritize punishment over protection. The Florida court case added another layer of complexity. Jasmine's filing in her home state forced Gino to engage lawyers familiar with Florida law, attend hearings there, and navigate procedural differences from Michigan. The dispute over which state's court had jurisdiction alone created a legal maze that drained time and money. His Michigan paternity claims might not even be considered if the Florida court determined it had exclusive authority over the divorce. This multi-state situation amplified the risk that Gino could lose control entirely.